Mark Nathan, who's the senior mortgage broker with Total Mortgage, which is a local mortgage company. We're going to talk mortgage too. So with that being done, let me bring us all up. Come on. There we go. Carl's there we go. It's being stubborn. All right. Let me make sure everyone can hear me. Carl, you can hear me okay. Okay. Ronnie, you can hear me okay.
I can hear you just fine.
Mark, you can hear me okay. The reason why I ask is we had a little bit of a feedback loop. And also I'm going to do a little yeah, I can. Hang on. Ronnie, hang on. I'm going to organize here for a second. Sorry, I'm just trying to get you and me in our normal spots here because otherwise I'll be looking in the wrong place all night for you. So anyway, welcome those watching on Channel 5, watching on weha.com, and statewide on Connecticut News Junkie. So I'm looking forward to I've been looking forward to tonight's show. So let me tell you what started this conversation about a week ago. Is a woman is searching for a house. I think she's looking in West Hartford. She's also looking in Farmington and, even up north a little bit. And forgive me, I forget the town, Simsbury. And she's finding it really, really difficult. The landscape has changed. I bought a house 3 years ago. In fact, basically this week, 3 years ago. And it's blown me away how much the landscape has changed. So I thought it would make sense, and Ronnie and I thought it would make sense to do a show on real estate and talk a little bit about how the market's changed and how you should prepare yourself if you're thinking about buying, selling, or refinancing. So we're going to talk a little bit about mortgages too. So, and there's a lot to unpack. Carl, let me start with you. You and I had a phone conversation which contributed to us doing the show, the concept of doing the show a week or so ago. And I said, let's compare my home buying experience 3 years ago and contrast to what it would be like if I were looking at a house today. So start walking us through the process. Talk about inventory, talk
Sure.
about what would happen if I looked at a house today and I needed a house.
So I think the biggest change is, you had more than 5 minutes to think about buying your house. You got to go home and discuss it and say, hey, should we put an offer in on this house? What are we going to offer them? Do you think they'll take it? Nowadays, it's many times these houses are listed. Many of the listings I've had lately have a prescribed period where it's like, okay, I'm listing it on Thursday and there'll be showings till Sunday, and then you can put in your best offer. And if it's priced properly, we're seeing houses sell 10%, 15% over asking. So, just anecdotally, I had one that my clients lost it in Canton recently, and it was the house was on at 360 and they offered 403 with as is clause. So they would have done inspections, but they wouldn't have asked for repairs, and they could close whenever they wanted, whenever the sellers wanted. They were putting 20% down, and we did not get it. So that's pretty typical. And I'm telling my buyers to be ready. I feel like I'm a therapist too, because, people are losing 3 or 4 or 5 houses, especially the ones that are really desirable. And, there's 25 buyers for every house. I mean, I think when I was talking to you last week, John, we were talking numbers, and I've got the multiple listing service open on my laptop next to me here. And we've been talking numbers for a while and watching them go down. And today, right now, there are 28 active single-family houses in West Hartford. To give you some perspective, I mean, a year and a half ago, there would have been 150, 160 houses. So
we're hopefully at the tail end of a pandemic. Okay, hopefully we're finally coming out of this long tunnel we've been in now for 13 months. People are unemployed. I think people are hurt were a year ago. Now, I know the government's tried to do a lot. between unemployment and stimulus checks. Why is this happening, and where are people, and I say this respectfully, I'm not, I don't want this to come off wrong, but Carl, but where are people finding the money to buy these homes, and where are the buyers coming from? Aren't there kind of a finite number of buyers for houses?
They're calling Mark. I'm trying to point to the right corner. I don't know which corner, but
that's
where they're finding the money.
From my perspective.
People are going to their lenders, and I'm sure he'll address that. The interest rates are amazing, so that's been another big push on why people want to buy right now. I think the bigger push was, as we closed down for the pandemic, we certainly saw a big exodus from Metro New York. There was an article, I know Ronnie shared it, the New York Times article last week. I mean, it was an advertisement for moving to West Hartford. It was a beautiful article talking about all of the great things that we all know living here.
So are the people who are buying, are the people who are buying homes, are they coming from other places, or are people, deciding, oh my gosh, I've been like holed up in my house with my kids and I just need more space?
I think it's both of those. Yeah, no, I think it's definitely both of those. I think we have an influx of people realizing how great Greater Hartford is. And on top of that, I think there's a lot of people who are wanting more space or wanting different space. The questions that people are asking are about separate areas. Not everybody likes the open floor plan, but everybody's also asking, okay, if the kids have to Zoom school or, Google Meet school, and I have to Zoom a meeting, and, everybody's got their own spot. Is there enough space for us to all kind of have our own little zone? I was going through that just now, making sure, like telling my son as he's playing on his computer, hey, I'm going online. I'm going on to an event right now. So just make sure you're quiet, because I'm not in the office. So that's a daily thing for everybody, I'm sure.
So let's talk about the New York Times article you alluded to. I don't believe this was your client, but it was a couple from Chicago who are moving to West Hartford. And you read the article. I'll let you tell the story, Carl. Talk to us about how they bought a house here in town.
I can tell my own personal stories about, the New York people that I've sold to, but it's, people are going about it as best they can, which is trying to find every means possible to find a house, whether that means going on Neighbors and Friends and asking who's selling their house, or reaching, having their realtors reach out to people. I've been reaching out more and more to people directly. And if anybody gets a takeaway from this, it's, if you are able to sell your house right now, do it. I mean, that we had our office meeting the other day. That was the cry. The cry was for inventory. Just everybody's looking and there's nothing to buy. So, the people that you were just talking about with me, we found a house that wasn't even on the market. It was somebody who was getting ready to sell, and it just, again, those are unusual circumstances, because usually it's best to go to market. But for these people, they really didn't want to do all the extra stuff to get ready. And the buyers had already lost 3 houses. So they were willing to pay a pretty high premium without saying, hey, we know you're not going to market and you probably get 6 offers. So we'll mark it up like there was 6 offers and pay you what you want.
What was amazing to me was the couple from Chicago. They literally only looked at the house from through a Zoom or some other sort of video. They looked at the interior, they looked at the exterior. The house, I think the wife commented, well, we've never bought a house that old. And I said, oh boy. But they bought the house. It was competitive bidding, and they were the highest bid. And it's just incredible to watch. And the other side of the equation is, and I've got it from this past Sunday's New York Times, is a boom, but for how long there was a great. This is just chock full of articles relating to this boom, and I don't want to call it a bubble, because I think the lenders, and we're going to get to you here in a couple of minutes, Mark, but I think the lenders are being a little bit more responsible today than they were being in 2005 and 6. But it's just crazy. So what'd you say, 28 houses on the market?
28 single family right now.
And and of those 28, what's the average time on market, would you say?
I can tell you. Let me just take a quick peek. I can give you the stats, but I did pull.
Not long is the answer, right?
Not very yeah, no, there's a few. I mean, I think some of the upper echelon houses, I would say most segments of the market are moving quickly, but some of the very high end stuff is a little bit slower. But I mean, I'm looking here and I think the longest days on the market I'm seeing here, there's a couple in the 200 days range, but I'd say the most of them are between 0 and 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
very, very low.
It took us 2
And
years.
what do you define as high end in this market?
Well, right now, I mean, of those 28 houses, the most expensive is on for 2.187 million, and kind of goes down from there, with the least expensive being 197,000. But I'd say the million plus is really what we're seeing more of things that are moving a little slower. There was a beautiful house that just came on the other day that caught my eye, and I don't have a buyer for it right now, but it was on for mid 900s and it was gone in 2 days. And I was just like, that house was beautiful. So,
Wow.
if it's priced right, and
Carl, where was it? If I can ask, it's a local show. Where was it?
That one that I was just talking about was on Walbridge.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Walbridge, 2 days. Incredible.
Yeah.
So
beautiful house.
So Mark, let's pivot to you. What I want to do is I kind of want to walk the potential buyer through the process and help educate either a new buyer or a former buyer who's experiencing this kind of market for the first time. So I think the first step would be if you need to borrow money, which just about all of us do, to buy a house, you want to walk in and see Mark or somebody like Mark. Mark, is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, the name of the game right now is really pre-approval, and you can't. Some people won't even let you see a house without a pre-approval. They don't want any, just people who are looking around or a neighbor coming in. They really want to know if they're a serious buyer. And if your letter from me or anybody else isn't up to snuff or satisfactory on a pre-approval, then you're just kind of glossed over. So I try to make these pre-approval letters as intricate as I can, but it's catered a la carte to each client. Some listing agents want to see that we close in 30 days. Some want to see that, what happens if they don't sell their house. People are buying new houses without any contingencies right now if they want to sell, because nobody's afraid of selling their house anymore. If you wanted to upgrade in West Hartford, that was tricky. There was an opportunity, but then what if I don't sell my house? And now there's a lot of people doing that. But I think back to what you asked about what's the first step. I mean, people are just applying. I mean, sometimes I just have people apply on my website referred by an agent. I may not have even talked to them yet, and they just fill out an application. And that's different than in the past. I mean, most people would call up, have a conversation, and get to know me a little bit, understand how our company works. And that still happens. They want to get a feel for it. And certainly people can come in. That wasn't happening for a while, but people are coming into the office a little bit now. But most people are doing everything. We're doing Zoom calls, we're doing phone calls, we're doing email, and they're giving me all their information. I'm running credit, and I'm getting them pre-approved so I can write a strong letter that says, they can buy without contingencies. There's really nothing to worry about here. Job's been verified, income's been verified, credit's been verified, assets have been verified. So there's really nothing else to do other than come to agreement on the contract and get a home inspection and then get an appraisal. And, that's probably one of the concerns right now is what's happening with appraisals, because values have gone up so much. And, that's another conversation, but there's a lot of closings that have been occurring at these higher price points. And that's what we're using for comps. So I haven't seen or really had any issues of houses under appraising.
So that leads me to a couple of questions. Number one, are these commitment letters, are they rock solid? So if I'm a seller, somebody walks in, they want to pay $250,000 for my house, and they've got a $200,000 commitment letter. Do you do the level of due diligence that we're not going to worry about underwriting? That's number one. And then number two, well, let me answer that first. I'll tie it up too much in a knot here.
Well, I lost you there for a second. You said number two was.
I'll come back to number two. I'll come back to
Okay. Well, look, the underwriting is pretty much foolproof at this point, unless something seriously changes or their information's been misrepresented. But my company, the way I do things, I mean, look, anybody can put into an application what they make. And, if you're a salaried individual making, $75,000 a year and you put that in, then that's what it is. But if you say you're making $75,000 a year and you're self-employed, a lot of times on the tax return, that's a little different. So we, depending on the client and their qualifications, we have to scrub that. But that's something that we do up front, and we're putting our neck out saying that they're pre-approved, and that is ironclad unless something material changes, like a job change or assets aren't verifiable. But really the question mark is still the appraisal.
Hey, John, I was just going
to. That was part two of
the
question. Are these appraisals coming back high enough in general?
I haven't had any issues at all on purchases. On refis, sometimes we'll have a little discrepancy because people think they can sell for a certain amount, and an appraiser might disagree with them. But when you have a contract, you have two willing parties put together, and the data shows that these, this house with this many bedrooms, this many bathrooms, et cetera, in West Hartford has sold for similar, then it's fine. And that's what I was saying before, is that these closings where people have been overbidding, this has been going on for a little while now. I mean, it's become popular to talk about because it's been happening, and it isn't going away right now because of the supply. But what's happening really, I think, is that these comps are verifying these values. But there are some that they make an agreement to buy a house, and if they say if it underappraises, we'll pay the difference. And
right.
I've seen that quite often, or we'll negotiate up to a certain point, but it hasn't happened yet. For me personally, I'm only one loan officer, but I'm sure it's happened out there a little bit because there are some appraisers that are pretty conservative, but for the most part, haven't really had any issues. And people know, clients know, like if it doesn't appraise, I'm still buying this house because I can't go back to the drawing board, find the next house that I maybe want, and then bid against 15 or 20 people. So the sellers are in the driver's seat. My gosh. I mean,
we were just doing a deal. We put in an offer on a house last week, and Mark was doing the loan for my buyers, and the sellers actually asked, how much tolerance do your buyers have to absorb an underappraisal? They literally said, would you put in the contract how much they'd be willing to absorb? And so that's when I said, hey, you got to talk to Mark and say, okay, if you're buying this house for $375 and it only appraises for $360, $355, whatever it might be, what's that going to mean to your loan? And how much can you tolerate before it becomes unaffordable? But that is something that some agents are asking and some sellers are asking because they're concerned. But I was going to reiterate what Mark said just about the getting pre-approved properly. And I think, anybody can put in what they want online, but I will say having a trusted lender is a huge piece of the puzzle right now, because if other agents know the reputation of a good local lender, whether it's Mark or somebody else, that holds weight. It's better than just the printed out thing from the Bank of America website. Like nobody's actually looked at your stuff. It just went through an automated approval, and nobody's actually checked the boxes to see that you really can get what you want. So those little differences are making all the difference right now.
So if somebody says they're willing to absorb an underappraisal, who vets to make sure that they have that extra $15,000 or whatever it may be to make up the difference?
Well, we would do that.
Make sure that money's in the bank, or that they can take out a larger size loan, or
part of our pre-approval process is to collect the asset statements and talk to them about, what would they do if that happens? Do you have the money? Can you get it from a 401k loan? Can you get it from a gift from family if you're tight? And we validate that. I mean, that's a true pre-approval, is giving me your bank statements and showing me that you have the liquid funds, or you're going to move money from, a non-liquid account, like a stock account, a brokerage account, or a retirement account. So validated.
So the first thing a buyer needs to do really is go see Mark.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That's what I do. I mean, when buyers come to me, that's the first thing I say is, get pre-approved, get your numbers in line, because inevitably the way it's almost always been is the opposite. It's, people find a house and then get their ducks in a row. And in this market, if you don't have your ducks in a row, you don't even have a chance with that house.
Right.
That's the truth of the market right now, is that even when you do have your ducks in a row, it's still tough.
Right.
All right. So I went to Mark. I did everything I had to do, showed him I have the income. I don't have to sell a house. So no Hubbard clause. I'll have you explain what a Hubbard clause is in a minute. I'm now ready to go see Carl. So Carl, kind of walk us through. First, tell us what a Hubbard clause is, and then talk about where you start.
So usually where I start is somebody calls and says, "Hey, I want to see this house," and then I'm saying, "Are you pre-approved? Are you ready to go?" and explaining how the market is right now. As far as the Hubbard clause, a year and a half ago, pre-pandemic, that would have been a pretty normal thing. You would have just said, "Hey, a lot of my equity, a lot of my money that I'm going to use to buy this next house is in the house I'm living in now." And so you would generally look at it and say, "Okay, I have to sell to buy." So that's a Hubbard clause, is a sell to buy clause, which gives you a certain amount of time to sell your house in order to purchase the one that you're making the offer on. In today's market, very, very few sellers will take that. I would venture to go to say no seller's going to take it, but there may be one or two out there, some of those houses that have been on for a longer period of time. But in general, most sellers, they're going to have 6, 8, 10 offers. And if you're the only one that's contingent upon selling, they're not going to take the risk that your house is the one that's going to be on for 3 months and won't sell. So they want to see that you can buy without selling. And Mark, that's one of the things I've been talking with a lot of my clients about as they come in, saying, talk to Mark, get pre-approved, get your ducks in a row, make sure that you have enough liquid asset, or, borrow from your 401k. And in most circumstances, I'd be worried about borrowing to do a down payment on another house. But as long as their house is priced right when they do go to sell it, you put your deposit on house A, and then house B is your house. You put it on the market, and hopefully your house is going to sell in 4 days with 7 offers too. So maybe you're going to have a little overlap, but maybe you can even coincide the closings so that you're closing on the same day and you don't have any overlap. And then you have that extra equity to put back in. But that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is, a lot of times people come to me saying, "Oh, I saw this house on Trulia, Zillow, Realtor.com, whatever it was," and it's generally already under deposit because they didn't know the lingo to look for that contingent, which is, meaning that it already has a contract on it. And what your local agent is going to do, which I do for pretty much all my clients, is sign you up for direct email listings from the multiple listing. So the multiple listing service is where agents go to look at the inventory, and we have the ability to sign you up as a client to get direct listings. So literally, I put in a listing now in 1 minute. If you're signed up and it meets your criteria, you get the email that says, 123 Main Street is on the market and it meets your criteria. Here you go. And the other thing that I'm signing a lot of people up for besides active listings is the latest and greatest, which is the coming soon. We're allowed to put up houses up to 2 weeks ahead on the multiple listing to basically pre-advertise. They are not allowed to be shown. They are not allowed for, you can't have an open house. You can't have buyers walking through. It is literally just hey, we're going to be on the market on such and such a date. And here's kind of the pre-marketing to show you. Literally all you have to have is the front photo and the regular description of the house, and you can put it up on MLS. So a lot of people are sort of getting that notification that a house is coming on, and then trying to book appointments. Say the house is coming on Friday, today's Wednesday, I'd be booking the appointments now for Friday when it goes active to try and get you to be the first, in there on the first day so that you can see that house. And if it's the one, put the offer in.
It's astounding to me how different it is today.
It's fast and furious.
So I got my
tight.
house 23 years ago, so that it's been a long time, but we helped our daughter and future son-in-law buy a house 2 years ago, and it was definitely nothing like this market at all. But I actually have a question about qualifying for a mortgage. The impact of the pandemic it's impacted the real estate market in a lot of different ways, but a lot of people have suffered, financially. Are lenders more cautious about people's job situations than they were before? I mean, how difficult is it to actually pre-qualify to get a mortgage?
It's definitely a little more difficult. I will say that I haven't talked to a ton of people to get pre-qualified that have been affected by COVID because they're just not ready, because they know, like, they're worried about the employment or the income. But what the industry is doing is, looking at each individual and making sure they understand the effect of them on COVID. We're seeing income before COVID and during COVID, and now after opening up, we're seeing pay stubs, we're seeing W-2s. We're asking about self-employed, their businesses, how were they affected? We're looking at tax returns and bank statements to see cash flow for those self-employed individuals, and, seeing how their business, I mean, we know what their business is, and we all know, like, what's been affected, maybe a restaurant owner versus, somebody working at the Travelers. They're still working. Maybe they're working from home, but that hasn't changed. But it's also looking at profit and loss statements. If we have a client right now that's, filed their tax returns for 18 and 19, but they haven't filed 2020, and that was the pandemic year, and we're 4 months into 21, and they can't give us any data, then it's not going to work. We would really need to see that they're okay. And the industry's been scrutinous of that, I think, and rightly so. I mean, they don't want to create a problem for those individuals either. But it's really been an unknown. I mean, let's face it, we've never really seen anything like this. On the flip side, one of the positives has been on the appraisal side, where we're actually getting a lot of waivers for certain, clients that are coming in and putting down large down payments or refinancing properties that, maybe they're just at 50% of loan versus value percentage because the values have gone up and they want to refinance. I won't even need an appraisal. And, nobody even wanted those people, the appraiser, in their house anyways. So the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the industry has allowed that to happen because they have all this data. They've been doing appraisal collection since like 2010 when we had our last crisis, and they've got data on all these houses. So for the most part, that's been a lot easier. So refinancing has been, imagine somebody comes to me and I don't need an appraisal, so we're not waiting for anything. We just approve them and we close them within 30 days. I will say that the difference with our company versus like a big bank or other companies like internet companies, they can't close that fast because they don't have the ability to move that fast, and they're taking 60 days, 90 days, maybe even more, but we're going quick, especially if we don't need an appraisal. So that's been a positive, but your question is valid. I mean, it's been tricky. So underwriting guidelines definitely tightened up during COVID.
So it's not as loosey-goosey as 2004, 5, 6, 7.
I'm sorry.
It's not as loose as it was in 2004.
Oh yeah,
5,
no.
7.
Nothing's that loose. I mean, that we're not even near that. It's so like you said before, John, about are we in a bubble? Are we going to have a crash? I mean, I don't think we're not in a place where people are financing 100% of these properties and walking away with crazy mortgage products. These are 30-year fixed rates down in the 3s for the most part, some in the 2s. A lot of people got refinanced into the 2s. Right now we're right around 3 for a 30-year, and people have equity, so they're not necessarily walking away from their house. But if they had to, because they were losing their job or they couldn't make ends meet, they're probably not going to get foreclosed. They'd probably sell their house and make some money. So,
which is kind of a good segue into one of the questions that we have in the chat here. John, I don't know if you saw this question.
I've been following it. Yep.
It's so if somebody does decide to sell their house or just wants to sell their house and buy a larger home, but they sell so quickly, then they don't have another place to go. What's going on with the rental market? We have one person who says there's no like 3 or 4 bedroom homes to rent available. What do you do in the short term? Or
It's
live in the back of your car.
The rental market is just as bad as the sale market. It's very limited inventory. Fight to the finish on every rent. I've been showing some rentals to a few people as well, and it's the same thing. 10 applicants, 12 applicants for a rental, and they're scrutinizing the applications. Who's got the best credit, the best income, the least number of people living in the house or unit because it's lower wear and tear and less water on the water bill. All of those things are factoring in. But I've been telling people, really, you've got to kind of decide what you want to do for your next step before you decide this step. So if you're selling, you really need to figure out, are you gonna buy something else? Are you gonna move in with the family or the in-laws or something like that? Are you gonna try and find a rental? Are you gonna downsize? Are you gonna take the Winnebago across America for a year? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of options out there, and I think you really need to have that lined up. I do have a lot of sellers who ask that question, saying, I'm interested in selling, but what am I going to do? Where am I going to go next? And that's the advice I give, is we need to make a plan so that you're covered. Also, people want the houses. I mean, there's such a demand. People want the houses like tomorrow. I mean, if Mark can turn around a loan in less than in a month or less, a lot of people want to close that fast. And certainly you can, as a seller, you can dictate. I've seen closing dates out as far as July already. I've seen things in the multiple listings saying, they want to get their kids through the end of the school year, so they'd close the first week of July. But once you go beyond 90 days, it gets a little tougher, and it's hard for people, because then those buyers, are they in a stable place where they can stay for those 90 days or longer in order to accommodate your closing time? So there's a lot of tricky maneuvering and planning, and that certainly is not there's no easy answer for that.
And that's got to be one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of inventory, is that people don't know where to go. If they sell their house, I'd love to sell my house now. That's what they're thinking. I'll make a ton of money, but then where am I going? And unless you have a second home or family to live with, you're hesitant, and that's definitely a contributor to the inventory.
And while we're taking questions from the audience here, we have a question on a lending question. How are VA home loans doing against others, Mark?
We don't see a ton of VA around here because obviously we're not sitting next to a base. But I have other people at my company that are working, down in, the Mystic, Niantic, in that area. And VA actually marches to a little beat of a different drummer with the appraisal process. They have their own portal. It's been going on like that for years. So if you want a VA loan, it's a great product, 100% financing, no mortgage insurance, and the rates are unbelievable. But the appraisers tend to be a little conservative sometimes, and they can take a really long time. And it's not ideal. But I just had a client this week. We were debating VA versus conventional, and they needed to close quick, and they were worried about it under appraising from a conservative appraisal viewpoint, and they went with the conventional loan instead. And that was a little easier decision for them, because they were already going to put down some money. If they needed 100% financing, then they probably would have gone with the VA. But truthfully, I don't, they're up against so many offers where people are putting down more money that I don't know that a seller is taking a VA offer with no money down right now.
I can tell you too.
Yeah.
Tough when you're instant and call what I mean by this statement. Oh, sorry about that, Mark. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay, no, I'm good.
I was just gonna say, that we are having sellers scrutinize loan products. Government loans have definitely kind of gotten a bad rap in the sense of that scrutinization on appraisal and conditions. FHA, CHFA, VA all have little stipulations like on conditions of the property, not having peeling paint or broken windows, or if it's a property that's in distress and it needs work, it's really tough to get those loans through. And that's actually something, it's Fair Housing Month this month, and we've been pushing as a National Association of Realtors and even as the Connecticut Association of Realtors, CT Realtors, we've been trying to get some of those things off of those government loans because it adversely affects people. Like I firmly believe that, a veteran who's served our country should be able to get a product like that at a preferable rate with no money down. But if the seller looks at it, and even if they wanted to be supportive to that veteran, the product is disproportionately hurting them as a seller. It's making them do work or go through hurdles with the appraisal. And so we've been really trying to kind of lobby to get some of those things changed because they're fairly antiquated. I mean, why should 4 square feet of peeling paint be an issue to somebody who's able-bodied and can scrape it and paint it? Why does the seller have to do that in a market like this where they're not going to do that? I mean, we want people to be able to use those products and get the house and not have somebody say, I'm not taking your offer because of your loan product.
The next step would be you find the house of your dreams with Minsky, and then you make the offer, and really your choice is to put an inspection contingency in there or not. And Carl, talk about contingencies, mortgage, inspection, radon. The more contingencies you put in, the less likely it is your offer is to be accepted, right?
That's certainly true in this market. And I think kind of the ubiquitous thing that we've seen lately is a little form called the as is clause, which a lot of people are like, I don't want to buy it as is. What if there's a problem? And really what it allows you to still perform your inspections, but it doesn't obligate the seller to do repairs. It just gives you an out if you find something that's horrific. I think what every seller worries about is, if you have 2 offers and they're maybe $1,000 or $2,000 apart, are you going to try and wiggle that back in the inspection? Which is why they like that as is clause. Because if there's, if there's something huge, something big, as you said, radon, radon is not a terrible thing to abate, to get rid of. It's not a super expensive problem, but it is a big concern in a lot of people's eyes. And, a seller may take care of that. Or they may just say, it's $1,500, $2,000, you have to take care of it. But that's something where if you do the as is clause, they have no obligation. And if you can still go back and say, hey, we found this radon, what do you think? But they have no obligation to do it. And if you are really overly concerned, I would say the bigger one that we see more of is, like east of the river, not so much in West Hartford, but with the crumbling foundations. That's still been a big thing where people are saying, if you're buying a house in South Windsor, you want to make sure you have at least an as is clause and get an engineer in there to check it out if it hasn't been checked out already, because that's life changing. I mean, that's not $2,000.
Carl, do me a favor for the audience. It's not something that impacts us, thankfully, here in West Hartford, but talk about what happened, what the litigation is. Is there has the government put together a bailout fund? Talk about what the issue is and what's happening with it.
So probably a decade ago or so, we sort of found out about this. This is an issue mostly northeastern Connecticut. It was there was one major quarry and concrete provider. JJ Modis was the company, and they were the one that sort of caught the brunt of everything. They are actually out of business quite a few years now. But they were using a quarry, and the aggregate, the stone and stuff that they would put in and mix into the concrete had pyrite, which is basically like a metal, more or less, and it oxidizes. You think of metal, it rusts, that's oxidation. And if you have that inside of concrete, it causes the concrete to, as they say, crumbling foundations, it crumbles. It looks almost like a spider web crack across it. Any realtor who's seen it and gone through any of the classes on it, if it's apparent, you can see it in a minute. But there is a state fund, which still I think still has some money in it at this point, but they've been talking about refunding it. And you can apply for it. But the changes that were made are that if you are buying a house now, you have to do the due diligence as a buyer to go in and have a licensed engineer look at the foundation, and they grade the foundation. And if you have that done and it is not, if it has issues, then you can either back out of the deal, or you can move forward with the deal and apply for some aid through the state. But if you don't have that done, I think it was 2 years ago it was set into motion. If you don't have that inspection done when you buy your house, any transfers from that time, you are no longer eligible for the fund. So that's the big thing that I'm telling my clients. I had someone who bought a house in Glastonbury about a year and a half ago, and we weren't really super concerned because that's kind of very much on the edge of where the crumbling foundation issues were. But they said, I think it was $600 or $700 to have the engineer come out, more than the home inspection. It would cost just to have this guy come and look at the foundation was more than the home inspection was. And they said, we are absolutely doing it. And I said, that's a great, if you have any concerns over this, that's a great thing to do, because then at this, they can't tell you what's going to happen in the future until you do a core test, which is drilling through it and sending it off to a lab. But they can do a visual inspection, and as long as it doesn't show anything, at that point, that you're okay for now.
It is a terribly tragic situation. I know we're not really talking about West Hartford. Were there any homes?
What was that?
Carl, were there any homes? Sorry, were there any homes at all in West Hartford impacted or not?
I have heard of none. There is a map on one of the state's websites that shows everywhere, and I haven't checked it in a bit because it's been a little crazy. But I have not seen any houses in West Hartford. There's been a few outliers in a few spots, but the bigger thing, the reason why you don't see it too far spread is the amount of time that concrete in a mixing truck can sit is finite. So that's why they sort of set that 25-mile radius ish around that one particular quarry, because once you start getting further than that, the concrete will start to set in the truck.
Okay,
so,
interesting. Okay.
Thankfully, we were saved by that. I think
Yeah.
It could have been much worse if it could have sat in the truck for days.
It really is terrible. It's got to be a six-figure repair. It has to be 6 figures to do the repair on a typical 3 or 4 bedroom house, right?
I've heard everything from $150,000 to $250,000.
Wow.
And one of the things that the state has done is on some properties, and this is something, again, if you're looking at a house that may have this issue or does have this issue, they've done tax abatement. So what they've offered is basically to say, you will only pay property taxes on the land. So it cuts your tax bill. For many people, it cuts it in half. But even if you get that, let's say you have an $8,000 a year tax bill, that's only $4,000 a year. If that's,
so it's going to take 20 years or more to get there.
Yeah. You got a long time before you're going to pay off the rehab to the house.
Yeah. I do know somebody who is having their foundation redone now because of the crumbling foundation. I think she lives in South Windsor, and she had pictures like right before Christmas of her house up on risers. Yep. As they created a whole new foundation, and she was living in an apartment. I don't know how long it's going to take, or she may be back in it by now, but it's the process to go through to have that foundation recreated is just unbelievable.
I can't even imagine.
It's
awful. It's awful. So kind of went down a rabbit hole there, Carl, but I think it's valuable because you know what? There are people in West Hartford who, maybe are getting empty nesters, that sort of thing. They're looking to downsize, and they're looking maybe to save some taxes too, not as concerned about the schools, or maybe they're looking at some towns outside of this area, and they should be aware of it.
Absolutely.
It's a scary situation. So Carl, I mean, the message here, and going back to our phone call 2-3 weeks ago, I think the message for a buyer is, I think it's a little bit of you have to really go in being prepared to make possibly one of the biggest financial decisions of your life very, very quickly. And you have to be very prepared. I mean, am I summing that up fairly accurately?
I think you nailed it. I mean, I think it's the three things I'm telling my buyers. Like, day one, it's, mortgage, finances, everything in order. It is second, be ready. It's harder when you see the first couple of houses because you have no perspective. But once you get deeper into the process, I find oftentimes people lose a house or two or three before they get the one that they want, because they are not psychologically ready to throw everything at it, go in guns blazing, full force. So sometimes that happens. So I always tell people, if you see that house, you've gotta put your absolute best foot forward. And the advice that I give, which I've taken myself, because we bought our house in 2006 and we put an offer on another house and lost it. And I'll tell my buyers what I told my wife when we tried to buy that house, which is, you need to put in an offer that is at a price where if you get it, you're not going to feel like you overpaid tomorrow. And you also feel like if you don't get it, you would not have paid $1 more. That's a number that you have to come up with. I can give you comparables. I can show you what else is sold, but that number is a psychological number in your own head. There's a number where people say, this is too much, I can't pay any more than that. And, I can say, sure, you should go 10,000 more than whatever that number is. But I don't ever want my clients coming back saying, I feel like I overpaid. I want you to feel like, okay, I went to the number that I was willing to, and if I get it, I get it. And if I don't, we'll move on to the next one.
I got to add
that number
to
has
that.
to be pretty strong these days.
Carl, I want to add to that, because one of the things that Carl and I do, especially in this market, is I'm trying to educate the clients on, well, what does that mean if you pay 10,000 over ask? I mean, it's all up to you, and what's the payment effect? So every $10,000 at today's interest rates is less than $50 a month, $45 a month. So I'm not an advocate for overpaying, but if that's what the market's doing and you like a house and you need a house, you got to be ready, like Carl said. And if you're going to go a little bit over, it's not as bad as you think, but it's that mental stigma of like paying too much. It's hard. But all I can do is guide them and give them the numbers. And, once they have the idea of what the closing costs are and the prepaid taxes and the down payment, that's what we're going to educate them on, making sure you're comfortable and prepared.
So one final question I have, because we definitely need to make sure we're off by 7. I have actually another event to attend at 7. What do you see as kind of turning things around? What's going to have a profound change in the real estate market, or do you have any idea?
At this point, I think it's going to be, unless there was a drastic change one way or the other in the economy, or a huge change in interest rates, which I'm sure Mark would agree is not on the horizon. I think the only thing that's going to change our market is more inventory. If there's more things to choose from, maybe there won't be 14 offers on the houses. If I'll say what I started off with. We had our office meeting and our office manager said, inventory, we need inventory. Tell people if they're ready to sell, put it on now because we're short. So I'll go back to that and just say, I'm looking at, we've actually been selling pretty close to the same number of units. They've just been moving quicker. So we have less on the market at a given time. But I pulled the year over years, and it's crazy how quickly it dropped. January 2020 versus January 2021, number of sold listings was down 11.3%. And the number of new listings was down 25%.
Wow.
So it's tough. And then you look at
And
sales
it's literally
prices.
like a switch. When COVID started, this started.
Yeah,
This didn't
Literally.
start before COVID.
Yeah. Who knew?
literally.
Yeah, really
Nobody.
incredible. So, Ronnie, we have to wrap. We actually have a 6:55 hard stop because we're going to lose TV. So, do you have any more questions, Ronnie, for our guests?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
All right. I'm going to ask, the appeal for inventory. If you're thinking about selling your house, if you want to talk to somebody about selling your house, give Carl Lance a call. Carl, how do our watchers, our viewers reach you?
My cell number is 860-515-8225. My website is Lancelot, spelled like my last name, LANTZALOT.biz. You can find me right on there. And I'm on Facebook. I'm easy to find.
And Mark, thinking about refinancing, thinking
Sure.
about buying a house, want to be pre-qualified. I want to have all the tools at my disposal so I can move quickly. How do I reach you?
They can find me by just going to totalmortgage.com, and they'll ask the questions about if you're looking in West Hartford. You can find me on my website, nathanrates.com. That's NATHANRATES.com. And my cell, I use it all the time for work, is 860-985-3987.
All right. And Carl, I got to apologize to you. I just realized now I misspelled your name on the opening slide. So my apologies. It's LANTZ. I'm not sure what I was thinking when I did that. I'm very, very sorry.
No worries.
We do have to wrap up. We got TV for 45 more seconds. Any parting shots, 10 seconds each before we call it a night?
I'd just say, get after it if you're looking for a house. That's the biggest thing is be ready and go out full force.
Mark,
I'll
10
say
seconds.
mortgage local.
There we
Agreed.
go. Mortgage. All right. For Ronnie Newton, I'm John Lyons, weha.com Roundtable, and we're going to be back. We're putting some shows together. We're going to try to make it more than once a month here. So we'll see you all next time. Thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thank you, guys.